Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. Jenn Pike is here. Welcome to the show, Jenn.
Thank you.
So deeply excited to have you here and for the conversation that we're about to have today. For those who don't know who Jenn is, Jenn Pike is a medical exercise specialist and functionally integrative diagnostic nutritionist who specializes in women's health and hormones. She is the best-selling author of 3 books, The Simplicity Project, The Simplicity Kitchen, and The Simplicity Body. Jenn is a fiercely driven founder of the Hormone Project, Synced, and The Audacious Woman, powerfully potent programs dedicated to empowering and teaching women what they should have known about their bodies all along. Essentially, the incredible healing abilities, wisdom, and power that they hold, and how to bring them to life. Jenn also sits on the advisory board for Strong Fitness magazine and serves you up weekly doses of education, wisdom, and inspiration on the Simplicity Sessions podcast. Her channel on YouTube, Simplicity TV, has more than 3 million downloads. She is also an inspired wife and mom of 2 and understands that true well-being as a woman is a journey to be enjoyed, not a struggle to be forced. So a little teaser. Welcome again, Jenn. We're definitely going to be diving in deep today, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time to come on the show.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So one of the things that I love doing is kicking things off with our guests, sharing a little bit more of your story. I know I just shared your bio, but what is it that really got you into the work that you're doing today? What's your story?
For me, I've been in a gym fitness environment my whole life. My dad was always very active, and I was, out of the 3 of us siblings, the one that was always kind of like tagging along and being in that world. And in the beginning, I was working a lot with athletes when I came out of school as a strength and conditioning coach. Primarily, I was working with male athletes, a lot of hockey players, and I loved it. And it was a lot of fun. But then I was also part-time personal training a lot of women and a lot of moms at the gym where I grew up. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, these women have so many more obstacles and barriers to be able to actually, take charge of their health and their body, and they're raising kids and they're working and doing all of this. And I started to find myself be less interested in working with the athletes. And I was like, you guys are fine without me. Like, you have a whole team, you have a village to take care of you. And I really just wanted to support these women more. And so that's, what I started to do. And then when I became a mom myself, it was recognizing, wow, things are very different in my body and just in how I show up in the world as a mother and as a business owner. And the deeper I started to go into the work with women, I recognized that where exercise and nutrition were so powerful as tools, that there were things happening beneath the surface that these women were constantly being dismissed with, whether it was like improper blood work or not being explained what was going on in their body, a lot of symptoms that they were dealing with outside of, weight gain, which is why they would come to me in a gym environment. They weren't sleeping, they had no libido, they had anxiety, depression, just all these different symptoms. And I'm always like, I'm a forever student. And I just started to dive deeper and deeper and realize what a vast area of opportunity we were missing on not diving into women's health and hormones. And I made that my mission. I went on to open up my own studio and space and, created this incredible community, and then got to a point where it was like, okay, if I'm really going to create the big impact in the world, I want to do this irrespective of where people live. And that, put me online. And this is what I've been doing. I registered my first iteration of this company when I was 17, and I'll be 45 this year. So I've been doing this a lifetime. I've literally been doing this now more than half my life. Wow. And I love it. I love it. And as time has gone on, my mid 30s, around the time of 36, 37, I was definitely starting to feel another shift in my body. And this is where, cycle syncing came into my world and into my life. And I was training for my second fitness competition at that time. And that world is very, deceiving in a way, because you look at all these bodies that are in such great shape and you think, well, they must be the healthiest people ever. And then you get into that world and what you realize is it's actually so unhealthy and not sustainable. And I made a promise to myself that when I was doing my third and final show, when I was 39, turning into 40th year, that I was going to train completely based on my body's rhythm and cycle. I was not going to do it the way the industry told me. I was going to do it based on the way my body was telling me. And I actually ended up going on and I won both my divisions in my pro card. And then I never got back on stage again because I was like, thank you very much. Like, I'm done. But that really opened up my eyes to, oh, we are so much more powerful when we actually tune into the phases we go through every single month, the ebbs and the flows, when we honor where we're at energetically, when we learn how to move according to that, how to nourish according to that, when to like show up in our life and in the world in a bigger way. And it was the total opposite of how I had been mentored, how I had been coached, and how I had been led, mainly by incredible men in my life. But I was trying to model myself after these men or women in my life who were really showing up with the male model. And, I've always been somebody who's like, I'm going to do things differently, but I was doing things the same way everyone else was. And that was a light bulb moment for me to be like, how about you actually do things differently? And here we are.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I love that. What a journey. And I love this piece because this is really what I want to dive into today with you as you're sharing about how everything shifted for you when you really started honoring your body.
Yeah.
Right. And honoring your cycle as a divine feminine, as a woman. And the truth is, I know so many listening to this episode and so many of my clients, every woman I know really struggles with this, this world that we've lived in for decades that does not support or preach or encourage or even know how to navigate how to actually honor the cycle that we go through as women on a monthly basis. And I know this was a huge part of even like my root causes of my binging and addictive patterns with sugar, right? I was so burnt out. I was so exhausted because I was not honoring my body.
Yeah.
And this is really that next level of honoring the feminine. And I at least in my networks, and I'm sure in your networks, like I feel like we're starting to reclaim that. We're starting to bring that forward in society and not poo-poo it like we used to. Yeah, which is really beautiful. So for anybody who's listening that this is kind of a new concept, they have no idea what we're talking about. Can you share a little bit more about, what is cyclical living? What does it mean to actually live according to your cycle? What were some of the things that you specifically did?
Yes. And I will explain this in, I'll kind of ebb and flow between the cycles we have that we go through naturally, as well as like seasonally and lunar, because for a woman who's listening who either doesn't have a period right now because she's postpartum, or maybe she has amenorrhea, or she is menopausal, postmenopausal, she doesn't have
I don't have a cycle right now because I'm pregnant.
Well, that's another reason, right?
So this is another reason. Yeah.
And B, you would be following more of the lunar rhythm, right? So the cycles of the moon. So okay, let's take this back to understanding the fact that as women at our core, irrespective of what phase of life we're in right now, at our core, we have moved through 4 different phases every single month from the time of puberty onward into where we are right now. So when we start to actually get our cycle, which we know as our period, for most of us, we've been taught the period is the main event and that's it. When someone says cycle and period are the same thing, and they're not. Your period is one of the phases of your cycle that you go through. Okay. So what is actually happening in our body is we have this build up of hormones, estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, that are happening throughout the phases of the month. And we have a decline of those hormones that then signal the lining of our uterus, which has been growing, to shed, producing our period. That doesn't just happen in a blink of an eye and, oh, it's 27 days on the calendar, so tomorrow's day 28, we're just going to get a period. Is this beautiful orchestra happening behind the scenes. And so when we actually, and I'll start this from the beginning of phase 1. So when your period is done, you no longer have your bleed, you are in what is called the first phase, which is your follicular phase. That phase in our body is when now the hormones are starting to rise again. So estrogen is starting to increase. hormones that are produced in our brain, which are our follicular stimulating hormones and luteinizing. In English, what this means is the hormones that travel from your brain to your ovaries and say to the follicles on your ovaries, start to mature, start to get ready, start to pick the chosen one, the egg that we're going to release when we go into ovulation. And ovulation is actually the main event for our body. We can't produce healthy progesterone without ovulation. It really is the bridge between that first half of like building. And it's not just building up the lining of our uterus. It's building us. It's building our energy again. It's rewiring our brain in another way, where cognitively we show up very creatively, very sharp, very outward energy. It's like, I'm back, right? Like that's that energy. And coming into ovulation, every woman can have a different experience in ovulation. Some women will say, I feel the most my feminine in ovulation. I feel like bright and wide open, just how like you would see the full moon in the sky, like look at me, because ovulation and the full moon are the same energetic rhythm. Okay. They represent one another. And that doesn't mean, as a woman listening, that if you don't ovulate with the full moon, that you're out of sync. That I want you to just like, don't even think that at all. But when we come through ovulation, and this is partly of how you can also start to understand if there's anything inflammatory going on in the body, for women who are like, that is not how I would describe ovulation. I don't feel great. I don't feel connected. I have inflammation. I have pain. My mood is all over the place. My boobs are so sore. Like I actually feel worse than when I get my period. That can be an early warning sign of possibly some endometriosis, some PCOS-like tendencies in the bodies, and just inflammation at our core. When we go through ovulation, which is actually the shortest yet the most powerful phase of our 4 phases, on the other side of that is now our luteal phase. And it's the longest phase we go through. And that is from the time that you've finished ovulating until you get your next period. That entire period of time, which for most women is about 10 to 14 days, so about a week and a half to 2 weeks. This is where our body is now preparing. And it's kind of sitting in limbo. Like we've ovulated, we released an egg. Are we pregnant? Do we need to actually start to prepare the womb as a home? Or we are not pregnant. Now we need to send the message for the hormones to start to decline. We need to get ready to shed the lining of this uterus, the endometrium that we have been growing, because we're going to go through the same phase again next month. And so that luteal phase at the tail end, this is when women will start to notice the mood swings, the cravings, the water retention, changes in digestion and elimination, sleep, headaches. These are a lot of the common symptoms that we would call PMS. Now, for a woman who has that exacerbated, like she feels just, it's not like moody. She has rage. It's not a little emotional. She is heart palpitations, anxiety riddled. It's not a little crampy. It is like, I am throwing up and I'm doubled over in pain. These are also a lot of signs of either PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is very common for women, or these are, again, early signs of things like endometriosis, difficulty managing some of our hormones behind the scenes. And then we get our period, and now it's like the body recalibrates. So phase 1 is that follicular phase that is prepping for ovulation. Phase 2 is ovulation. Phase 3 is the luteal. And then phase 4 is our period. That's the whole cycle. So when women hear things like, oh, a 28-day cycle is the average, what that means is from the first day of your bleed all the way through until you get your next period, however many days that is, that's your cycle. And it's not the average for women to be 28 days. It's actually more common for women to be like, oh, I'm kind of somewhere between like 27 and 30. Or for some women, they're like, no, my norm for me is 32 days. Other women are like, nope, every 25 days. So the norm is understanding yours, which is why it's important to track. It is important to pay attention, to make note of not just when you start and end bleeding, but all the little symptoms and all the little whispers from your body throughout. Now, if we're talking about this from a lunar cycle, so you being pregnant, or for women who don't have their period for another reason, and this includes women who are on the birth control pill, or they're using a hormonal IUD, because even though you may still get a period each month, you are not having a true period. You are having a chemical withdrawal bleed. So you don't ovulate. And so you're missing one of those phases. And so energetically, the moon, which the moon's rhythm is 29.5 days, doesn't ask permission. It doesn't get like, it's not like, oh, I was super stressed out, I'm going to be a few days late this month. The moon is like, no, this is how we show up. It's what we do. So that follicular phase, which is our first phase, this is the waxing moon. So if you look in the sky, and when the new moon is there, we don't see the moon in the sky. It's dark. And then we start to see this sliver, this like beautiful crescent start to emerge in the sky. After a new moon where we haven't seen the moon at all, we start to see it just come back with that little crescent. This is the waxing moon. It is starting to grow bigger because it's leading up to the full moon. Your follicular phase in your body after your period, you are starting to grow. The hormones are coming back. The endometrial lining is growing, leading to ovulation, which is the full moon. Full moon, it's full bloom. It is like, everybody look at me. Everybody like be in awe. It is there. This is when we talk about divine feminine energy, this period of time, the end of the waxing, the building, the ovulation, and then when the moon starts to, do the opposite crescent and make her way on out, this is our divine energy. And when we are in alignment in our bodies, this is how we feel. We're confident, we can show up, and it's a subtle confidence. It doesn't have to be, like I'm the most important person in the room, all eyes on me. It's like a quiet confidence. It's like this is authentically being who you are. Once the full moon is gone, and now you start to see that this large moon is now starting to get smaller, you start to see the crescent appearing on the opposite side. And this is called the waning. And the waning is the longest phase for the moon, just like it is in our bodies. And the waning it's the pulling back. It's starting to retreat. It is starting to hibernate, preparing for the new moon, which is like our menstrual cycle, our bleed. So for women in the luteal phase, this is my favorite phase. I actually think it's the most powerful. It's where we can learn the most about ourselves. It's where you have the greatest opportunity to lean in, to listen. What gets to come forward with me in the next cycle? What am I going to leave behind? What do I need to scrub and clean out and let go of in my life? How do I need to nourish myself? If I am more fatigued, if I'm inflamed, if I have crazy cravings, I am exhausted, these aren't issues of illness. These are microphones of opportunity. What are they telling me? Where do I need to have more stable blood sugar? Am I hydrated enough? Am I getting enough nutrients and minerals into my body? Am I resting enough? Right? So every single thing that we feel, whether it's in accordance with our physiology and our body or with the lunar cycle, is giving us information. And it's this feedback loop that when you pay attention to it and you start to connect, those frequencies of like, this isn't just made up. This is not woo. And here's the thing is, whatever you believe will be your truth. So if you believe it's woo, it's woo. If you believe it to be factual, it's factual. At the end of the day, it doesn't care because it's going to do what it does. The moon is not looking to you and being like, do you believe in me? Because I can only shine if you believe in me. I can only go through the phases if you believe in me. Your body is not saying, do you believe in me? Because I can only, it's happening regardless. The power point for women happens when you actually connect to that. And now you're like, oh, this is a superpower I have. And if I get to tune into it and I get to support myself at these different phases, what else can I do?
Yeah. What a source of power, right? When we actually tune in, it keeps coming to me as you're talking, right? Is the word flow, right? And how often do we actually, like what you're speaking to is flowing with the rhythm of what's happening in our body, what's happening with the moon versus fighting against it.
Yes.
Which I spent my whole life doing that. That's what I was taught. It sounds like you did as well. I think most women have been taught that, right? Just go, 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 do all the things, ignore your body.
Well, it's just because that's society. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you go, and then this is your path, and you're a student, and you do this, and you have to learn this, and you have to get these grades, and then you have to go to post-secondary, and then you need to get a job, and then you need to have the house, and then you need to start the family, and then you need to be good at everything. Like all the things. You have to be good at all the things. And regardless of how you feel, you just have to trudge forward because this is the plan. And you have to follow the template as opposed to creating your own blueprint. And it's like, I always explain this in seasons as well, because we can understand seasons. Like we are spring. You and I are both in BC right now. Okay. Like it's beautiful here. Spring for us as women, this is our new year. This is like spring is follicular energy. Spring is that waxing moon coming back, rebirthing. It's the planting of the seeds. It's like you look outside and you walk around and you can see all the trees budding. You can see life starting to come back. That is that season in our body. And as women, we're hardwired. When everybody else in January is celebrating, it's a new year, it's new year. our bodies are like, I feel like it's still winter, actually. I feel like we're supposed to just still be chilling and like
Yeah.
doing the internal work before we go and reemerge. Spring is the emergence, the reemergence in our bodies. Summer is the full bloom, right? And we know that. Summer is like, oh my God, we just want like the sun on our bare skin. We want to be out. We want to socialize. We don't really want to work all that much. And the things we do in our work, we want us to light up. Like we want to feel so ignited by that. And then fall comes around, and fall is the luteal phase. Remember, it's that phase of like getting clarity on what do I want to pull forward into this next cycle and this next year? What's going to come with me? What do I want to change? What do I want to harvest? I've been like planting all these ideas and these visions throughout the year. And now this is the time I get to bring it into fruition. If we talk about pregnancy and we talk about birth, we go through 3 trimesters internally in our body, anywhere for women between 37 and 42 weeks. Everybody's going to carry their baby for a different length of time. But you have a 4th trimester that is not celebrated. And the 4th trimester is actually the most powerful because this is the culmination. It's like when you meet your baby and you meet yourself when your baby is born. This is the most powerful, and it doesn't get celebrated the same way it doesn't get celebrated that we go through these different phases, and that you and I, regardless of how focused and determined and ambitious as we are as women and mothers and business owners, your body's like, I do not care about those things you just said. There is another plan that's happening. And so this fight, which is why so many of us get stuck in this cycle of burnout, burnout, burnout. We're burning out because we never fucking pull back.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like your menstrual cycle represents the divine pause.
Yeah.
Winter represents the divine pause and the death so that we can have the rebirth and the reemergence. And when all we do is just nonstop go and create, where do you ever have the opportunity to actually rest and recover so that you can rise again if you choose?
Yeah. 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 And this is a major problem. Like everything you're sharing is, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation on the podcast because I've been doing a lot of this work for myself over the last few years. And it's been life-changing to actually like learn how to rest. And there's a lot of reasons that we don't know how to do that. That can be really scary for a lot of women who have never had permission to rest, or it's not safe to rest. Exactly. But learning how to actually be in that flow, right? And surrounding yourself with people who support that. Mm-hmm. I think that was a big factor. You know, I used to be in a corporate role as well. And, you know, I used to just be in that grind, and it would never be supported for me to like take a couple days off before my bleed because I was exhausted, right? Or, you know, even just allow myself to maybe not do all the cooking, and maybe my husband does some cooking that week, and you know, things like that have really have a lot of impact. And I really want to bring this forward to like the topic, you know, that we talk a lot about on this podcast, obviously, with sugar addiction and our binging patterns on food. And I'm curious if you can speak to this, you know, a little bit in what you've noticed. But I know for me, you know, as I mentioned earlier a little bit, one of the biggest reasons why I was doing that was because I was so disconnected from the natural cycles of my body. I didn't even know how to feel my emotions, didn't even know how to honor what was happening, had no idea what the heck was going on with the moon or nature, right? Just very disconnected. And in that was constantly feeling overwhelmed, constantly feeling anxious, constantly feeling stressed, constantly being dysregulated in my nervous system. And I would just binge on sugar to make me feel better, right? To have that false sense of joy or happiness or calm, right? It was almost that fake form of rest so that I could keep going and have the energy to keep going, right? How many of you listening to this are relying on sugar and caffeine to just push through, right? And I think a great example when I first started this was like when I got sick. I was like, oh, my body's telling me I need to rest. And I started actually practicing that. And it was amazing just how my body would heal and come back. And, you know, there's so many nuances and pieces there, but I just wanted to bring that food component in because everybody obviously listening to this is struggling with that, you know, that if we're in this constant fight and this constant working against our bodies, it's no wonder our hormones are all fucked up. It's no wonder we're exhausted and stressed and moody and yelling at our husbands for no reason, you know, and just feeling completely lost, right? Because we are a little bit. and
We're at
coming
our,
back.
for many women, it's like, and you used the perfect word for this, is like, you had to practice rest, and we have to practice doing things differently. It's like we are hardwired. We don't understand this. We try and change things from an outside in approach as opposed to inside out. We're like, I just need a new plan. If I just have a new plan, if I have a new calendar, if I have a new, meal plan or whatever, like all is going to be healed. And it's like, no, you're not understanding. If you go, it's like, okay, I'll give you an analogy of this. You have really tight muscles and you're like, I'm just going to go for a massage. And then the massage, I'm going to feel amazing. And then my muscles are never going to be tight again. And you go for the massage and it feels great or not. It feels good when it's done. And you're like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And a couple hours later, you're like, oh my God, the tension's all back. And here's the reason. The muscular tension is coming as a result of either mechanical tension, skeletal tension, misalignment in your body, the way you hold yourself, like the muscles are soldiers. So they are creating a pattern that is based on some other stimulus. When you just go and like stretch out the muscle, rub the muscle, but you didn't change its origin source of like, no, it's not the muscle. It's like your rotator cuff or your actual head of your humerus isn't sitting properly in the shoulder. And so until you deal with that, this muscle is going to keep aggravating you. In life, you're telling yourself that you can't lose weight, you can't control your cravings, that, food is just owning you because you don't have the right meal plan or macros in place. And you're not understanding like what is triggering you choosing that food. Where are the cravings coming from? Are they coming because your blood sugar is unstable? Are they coming because someone just made you feel really sad, really inferior? You're feeling unsafe in your nervous system right now. Our body's always going to be like, where's safety? Where's predictability? Where's certainty? Where's familiarity? And if I don't have those things, I have to come back to a habit that makes me feel it. If I go and have the sweets, I get that hit of dopamine. I get that little surge. I have reassurance. Even though I know it's not good for me, it's familiar. And I just need to feel familiar right now. Oh, that relationship and that person, they're horrible to me and that does not feed into me, but it's all I've ever known. And that's where I feel belonging. I'm going to go back and jump in over there. So the most frustrating part for anyone trying to break any type of that construct of our mind and brain and the patterning our nervous system is we are so smart. We know we're doing it when we're doing it. And yet we are stuck in the pattern because it's familiar. And we're like, this is really damn uncomfortable, but it's what I know. So I'm just going to hang out here. And this has to happen enough times where we're like, I'm so sick of my own bullshit. Because we've all been there. I have been there too. Not when it came to food, emotionally eating. Mine was in business. I'm tired and burned out. Oh, I'll just say yes to one more thing. I'm tired and burned out. I'll just say yes to another thing. And so we all have this pattern. When you recognize it, it's not just naming it. Now you have to understand what are the triggers. So when I'm saying I'm tired and overwhelmed, why? And what is it that's overwhelming? And why can't I say no? Why can't I let there be more space? Why can't I have a house full of healthy food and choose that instead of going and choosing my secret stash?
Yeah.
And so when we start to understand for ourselves, like our own story and connection to that trigger and that thing, like what wound it is there that we are using food, shopping, work, sex, alcohol, whatever it is for you, everyone has their thing. And sometimes it's multiple things. Those are just the things. And it's actually, we think we are saving ourselves in the moment when we use those things, but we're actually injuring ourselves. We're hurting ourselves in the moment. But it's really hard when you don't understand, like, we're asking the wrong question. We're asking, how do I fix this instead of why is it here in the first place? Mm-hmm. And that's the hard work. And that is also a practice. Because even when you get to that place where you recognize, like for me, when I recognized why I was doing this again and again, and I was like, oh shit. Like when you figure it out for yourself, you can't unknow it, can't pack it away, and you can't ignore it. But you also now have to build a whole new kit of tools to heal from that and to move through it. And that is lifelong work. Like I started this work for myself, 17 years ago, and I am still doing the work. And I think it's probably lifelong work.
Yeah, I agree. You're fully preaching to the choir here. I'm so loving what you're saying. My audience, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, is well versed in my approach as well, which is very root cause, like understanding why the problem exists first in order to uncover a way out. And so many women, exactly like you're saying, right? We're so focused on the flashy things that are external, like you said, the meal plans, right? Or just going to the gym, right? We're focused on these external factors that have actually stem from our beliefs and our energy and the way we see ourselves and our emotions and just like internally. And until we really get down into that, I always use the metaphor of like, your car is having problems or there's like smoke coming out of the hood. So you go and wash it. And you're like, oh, looks good, right? You're like, well, how's that actually fixing the smoke coming out of the hood? It's not, right? But it looks shiny and pretty. And we get really sucked into this. So why do you think that's so alluring? This sort of like grasping for these external things, instead of actually doing the deep work. I mean, I have my own reasons or beliefs around that, but I'm curious your thoughts of like, why are women getting so caught up in focusing on the wrong things and avoiding doing this work that you're talking about?
It's multifaceted, but I would say the number one reason, and again, I've been in this industry now for going into 28 years. I also have done a lot of TV appearances. I have done a lot of writing for magazines. I modeled for many years. I have looked at this industry from many different angles. And I will tell you that on the one side of things, it is because this is literally what we are taught and how we are conditioned from a societal perspective. The plan is going to save you, the new protocol, the new book, the new podcast, the new this, the new that. And, listen, there's a lot of education and information. You and I both host podcasts that are fantastic. You and I are never going to be the ones to be able to do the work for the individual. We're conduits. We can connect them to it. But the same way that we're out here trying to do good work, there's a lot of messaging that is the opposite of that. And it is just feeding into women's vulnerability and their lesser than and their, esteem and their confidence. And it is, you surround yourself with enough people in the same messaging long enough, you'll believe whatever that message is, whether it's good for you or not, you will believe that. And so we are hit and inundated with tens of thousands of messages every single day when we are driving, when we are on, our social devices, on phones, in conversations, in lyrics we're listening to that is contributing to this. The other side of it is that it is actually easier in some ways to just perpetually join another thing. And this is another hit of dopamine. This is going to fix me. This is going to be the solution. And listen, I'm a huge fan. I run tons of group programs. I think the healing actually happens in the community. I think as an individual, when you're part of community, your healing will be expedited. No one is here to do the solo hero's journey on their own for life. And especially as women, like if you want to move through your healing faster, go and spend time in community with women who are on the same page energetically, who get it, who can hold space for you. That is massive. So I think we're groomed for this from a very young age, that you don't actually find the solutions inside of you, you find it outside of you. So we keep looking outside of us to heal what's happening inside. That's the first area we go wrong. The second is how we have been taught that you belong is by being like and following like and looking like everyone else. And the third is that we have never been taught as a society that it is safe to actually learn the most about yourself, your body, your ancestral, your stories, your limiting beliefs, all of that. That's not safe. In fact, that's ridiculous, or that's woo, or, that doesn't, you got to go over here. You have to be part of the masses. And so it is like, I'm raising teens right now. And my oldest, my daughter, she's going to be 18. My youngest, my son, he'll be 16. And I just look at how much has changed since my husband and I were of those ages. And when I started this work and when they were born all the years ago. And now I look at what they're moving through in this time. Our generation of educators, like the you and I's of the world right now, we are here to break the pattern. We are here to be a conduit, to have a loud enough microphone, to have the bravery and the courage and the audacity to lead by example for our children. Because if we, we are constantly saying, we are here to do things differently and we're the women that are going to then live your life like that and be brave enough and show up. And if you don't have the bravery right now, go and borrow it from someone else. Like you
Yeah.
don't get confidence by all of a sudden like planting a confidence tree. Like you get confidence and you get strength by you have to shake before you stand strong. And you got to get out there and do that. And so it's like every woman who is part of your community and listens to your podcast and is part of this conversation, you have to be willing to share it. You have to be willing to strike up the hard conversation. And instead of hashtag you can do hard things, which PS, yes, you can, but it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Instead of that, can you go and have the hard conversation?
Yeah.
Can you ask
Yeah.
the hard question? And can you do it for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know this is such a hard piece for, I'm thinking of all of my clients, and a lot of women I work with, is like how hard that is to be the black sheep. Like this is what you're talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
We need to do things different. It's time. I mean, we look at the world around us. Obviously, a whole bunch of things are not working. We need to do things differently. And I think there's a lot of parallels in exactly what you're sharing with our sugar journey, because it takes a little bit of grit and a little bit of self, empowerment to be willing to even give up sugar, being willing to not eat processed food. I know you and I both, not drinking right now. Like that takes a lot of, like you're going against the social norms, right? So it takes a little bit of like rebelness, like tapping into our inner rebel, which lives in all of us, to even do that, right? And now we're adding this extra layer, like they go in tandem with each other when we really decide to take back our power and to not live by the narrative that's so clearly not working and keeping everybody sick mentally and physically in our culture. Stepping into like just being different and being okay being different, because what is normal in our society is keeping everybody sick. I did a podcast not long ago about like, you don't want to be normal. Stop trying to be normal. I know I had so many clients who are like, I just want to be normal around food. And I was like, no, you don't. Because what's normal is really sick and
And
really
it's so
unhealthy.
how we've changed that. And we've made healthy eating alternative and we've made
Yeah.
healthy eating
Yeah.
weird.
And you
But
have
we
to pay more for food that doesn't have chemicals on it, right? Like it's just,
and that is the sad part, is it's part of a bigger ecosystem that lives
for
outside
sure.
of us. But it is, and trust me, like I get it in terms of it's hard. We were talking beforehand. I was saying like I've moved to BC in the wine region. I don't drink. And, I'm 44 and really at like 37, my body was just like, we need to have a chat because every time you drink, you make us not feel good. And it wasn't like I was having a bottle. It would be a glass or two. And I was having, I'd get congested. My face would get all flushed and I would have a horrible sleep and I would feel groggy for a few days. And I was like, oh, this is so disappointing because I love my wine. And but then over time, and it took me about, I'd say 4 years to fully give it up, because I'd be like, okay, well, maybe I'll just try an organic one, or I'll just try, maybe it's the red, I'll go white. Maybe I need to do rosé. Maybe I need to do this region. And I would do all of that. And in this time of slowly changing my relationship with alcohol, I was asking myself, why can't I just go to the dinner and not have a drink? And
Yeah.
why can't I just connect with my husband in a way where it's not having a drink? And why can't I? And so when I started to ask the questions, it was like, oh, I think I'm only funny when I have a drink in my hand. Oh, I
Right.
think that the only way I can like have my libido, speak up is like if I have a glass of wine oh, I'm afraid to be the one that is the odd one out and be like the purple duck with all the yellow ducks, where I'm over here having, like a soda with lime and everyone else is having whatever else. And it was me that actually gave me more power in making my decision. Because when I realized it has nothing to actually do with the alcohol, it's the story I'm making about
Yeah.
what it has to do with the alcohol. And I started to realize I can just have the wine glass with like a mocktail in it. And then it was like, all of a sudden now, 4 years later, when I connected the dots, I was like, oh, this is easy. I don't identify as being a drinker anymore. I don't drink. Who knew?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Right. So, and
Yeah.
all those different kind of things, in our life, it's with our kids, they have grown up in a healthy household, but they still eat junk and all of that. And every now and again, it's like they'll be eating more sugar and stuff. And I'll just say, hey, like I have a question, not about the sugar, but do you feel like you've been getting enough fruits and veggies and protein in?
Yeah.
Well, like, and then it's like, well, no. Okay, so if you didn't make the energy about getting rid of the sugar, but you just started to eat more protein and fiber and
Yeah.
like colorful food, it'd be interesting to see if you still have the same cravings for sugar. And
Yeah.
and that's my daughter's journey. And she's like, you know what? Now that I eat meals and I don't just like randomly grab a Starbucks or grab those things, she's like, I actually feel good and I don't have the cravings as much. And then and she's gonna be 18.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
incredible.
yeah, my
Yeah.
son's not there yet, but yeah,
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm excited and nervous for that journey myself of like how to pass this wisdom on without being putting the reins on so tight, right? That you can never eat sugar again, right? I'm
no, and
definitely
you
not
know
going to do
what
that, but
is, I mean, and you'll figure it out, everyone does. There's not a book to teach you how to do it, but
no.
I just by the time they hit 12, you don't really have any control over what they're eating or
Yeah.
anything anymore. And
Yeah.
like in our household, and definitely by the time they get their own job, I mean, see you later. But our thing in our house was this is the way we're going to eat and we shop, and this is what you're going to have as
Yeah.
your roots at home.
Yeah.
You're going to go out and you're going to eat the garbage. We did it. Like
Yeah.
and you need to. You need to go and
Yeah.
explore and have that. You need to understand what it feels like to feel good and what it
Yeah.
feels like to not feel good. And then you have to be able to make your own decisions because I can't helicopter you for your home. I'm not with you all the time. You have to know how to make
Yeah.
a decision. And
Yeah.
so you can't do that thing where it's like you're not allowed. And my kids,
Fully.
when they were little and they'd get invited to the birthday parties, and yeah, there were moments where I would just say, like, if a loot bag has this, or if a cake is there any way, that I just don't want them to have like the tartrazine or the art, because what would happen is when my kids did go eat that stuff, they would come home and be horrible versions of themselves,
Right. Of course. Yeah.
completely unhinged.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, that was part of like, it took some bravery having those uncomfortable conversations sometimes with other parents. But I always explained it in this way. It's like, if I were saying to you, my child has an anaphylactic reaction, you would do everything in your power to not feed that to my child for
Yeah.
their health. The fact that I'm just asking you because my kid does not do well with these artificial ingredients and his little brain is unhinged for 2 days, that should also be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And that definitely should matter.
Right?
Right. That
But
should be respected.
and the reason is it's not that us as humans are like, well, I'm not going to, it's that we've been taught that that's BS.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, oh, it's not a big deal.
That's
It's
extreme.
not a big deal because I eat it.
You're just kids.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll be fine. They've got fast metabolisms, right? All the stuff.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
Anywho,
Yeah. So I want to come back before we wrap things up because I want to come back to what we were talking about around the cycle. I want to leave my listeners with some better tools here around like really how can we start to reclaim and live by our cycle in the face of our old patterns, the way we've been raised, the busyness, like everything that we're talking about, right? It could be really hard. I love that you just mentioned a minute ago that, in your example around alcohol, it took 4 years, right? And I know for me with sugar, it was like a good 3 years of up and down and just a whole mess, right? So just acknowledging that this takes time, everybody listening, right? And I am absolutely not perfect at it. Especially now that I'm like, wait, I don't have a cycle anymore. And I need to now sync up to the moon. And it's hard sometimes to totally sync your life. And I'm continuing to learn and grow. But maybe you can quickly go through like the 4 phases and like, what are the things that we need to focus on in those phases and what are your best tips for starting to transition into living more in flow with our natural rhythm?
Okay. Step number 1 is pay attention to your body. Like listen to her when she communicates to you. And step number 2 is start to track using an app. So there's a lot of different apps that are out there. There's moon cycle apps. There's, period cycling apps. Just go into your app store and like intuitively choose the one that feels the best for you. And a lot of them are free. Then the next thing is like when we talk about that follicular phase after your period, this is actually when you're most insulin sensitive. Your body does really good at being able to. So for those who do things like, maybe intermittent fasting, which I'm not a fan of, like long-term long fasting for women, especially in our reproductive years. You got to be very careful of that. And especially if you identify with like adrenal fatigue and burnout. So you want to be focusing on protein, fat, and fiber at every single meal. You want to be movement wise. When estrogen comes back on the scene, you are stronger in terms of, your tendons and ligaments. So strength training, and working progressively towards your overload. And if you love doing some type of cardiovascular activity, this would be that time where you could bring the intensity up into and leading into your ovulation. Hydrating, making sure that your minerals are on point as well is really important in this first half of your cycle. Around ovulation, this is when you could be bringing in a little bit of the high intensity interval training over those few days. Nourishing your body. So what your body's looking for when you're craving sweets and, salt and fats, and that is looking for protein and balance. It's looking for blood sugar stability. So you can go have delicious things, but it's making sure it's in unison. So instead of just having like the chocolate bar by itself, and if you're craving chocolate or decadence, like, can you make like a thicker kind of like chocolate monkey protein bowl where you've got some of that richness in there, but it's satiating and it's stabilizing. And then coming into the luteal phase, this is a great time to do more integrative kinesthetic work movement wise. So yoga, Pilates, barre. You can still do strength training, but you're slowing down tempo and ranges of reps and like really connecting to your body. This is a period of time where you actually want to make sure you're not skimping on your carbohydrates in the luteal phase. Most women coming into PMS are like, I'm going to cut my carbs because I gained weight before my period and I'm bloated and I feel gross. That will send your cravings through the roof. So it's just about choosing healthier carbohydrates. Look for things that are richer in fiber. Look for things that are slower burning. Look for things lower glycemically. So organic berries, apples and pears for the pectin are amazing at that time of the month. Sweet potatoes, white rice is great to bring in. Sourdough is beautiful to bring in if you can digest and use that. And so it's like, a prime example would be like, having a couple of eggs that are fried up in good quality fats and then having avocado on your sourdough toast and some berries on the side. That's a super satiating experience for your body in that luteal phase that's going to help with some of those cravings that you have. And then coming into your period, your menstrual cycle, if you're somebody who loves to fast, this is actually the better time here. Those first couple of days of your bleed, and you can do like bone broth, or you could do, just some beautiful herbal teas or elixirs, soups and stews, like really grounding, very comforting meals to bring into our body. And then you would, repeat that cycle again. Walking is something I love women to do throughout their entire cycle for many reasons. It's incredible for your bone health. It is super calibrating for your nervous system. It's how you connect to nature. It is what will keep you connected to the seasons and the moon. It is also what exposes you to natural vitamin D sources so your body can produce it. And for your mental health and well-being, there is nothing better than getting out into nature. And then in terms of your stress response throughout that month, again, pay attention. If you are feeling yourself get really wound up and anxious, ask, am I hydrated? Is my blood sugar supported? Am I getting enough sleep? What am I doing that I freaking don't want to be doing? And what do I know I need to be doing to better take care of myself? And if it's not possible right now, how can I start to think about making that a possibility moving forward? Journaling, breath work, like really integrating into your body, right? It's very difficult to be connected to our bodies if we just keep like outsourcing out there. And so how you bring this into fully cyclical living is that you pay attention to this. And so you honor looking at your calendar. If you know that in a couple weeks' time is when your next period is due, look at what you're putting in front of that period. How many things can you possibly jam in and still be expected to have energy? So could you taper it down? If you like, my career doesn't always allow that. And I live cyclically, but I have a lot of meetings and things where it's like, I could be on the first 1 or 2 days of my bleed and my energy is like a 2 out of 10. So I can't necessarily cancel things because of that. But what I can do is make sure that I am getting better sleep the night before, that I have the food I need in the house so I feel nourished, that I have my water with my electrolytes right nearby, that I'm taking my magnesium and my B vitamins or my functional, mushrooms or herbs and those kind of things. So I have the tools for my body so I can feel my best, irrespective of what's happening in my cycle or in the world.
Yeah. So beautiful. I love that. Like sometimes we can't control the things, right? I'm thinking of that too. I've been in that space before as well, where I'm like in the beginning of my cycle and I have 3 client calls. I'm like, oh no, I don't have the energy for this today. But I support myself to make that happen. Thank you so much for sharing those pieces. I want to add something that I think will hit home, just again, knowing my audience, is also remembering, you've already mentioned this a few times, but I really want to pull it out as we wrap things up, is remembering that like those first 2 phases, whether you're cycling with the moon or you're cycling with your menstrual cycle, are really the time for more energetic type things. So more outgoing things. As a recovering extrovert, I didn't know that there were times of the month when I should be an introvert. So this is the time to make parties, book events, book trips, getaways with your husband, or spouse, fun things with your friends, big, launches in my business. I would plan those around this time when I'm naturally going to have more energy. And then those last 2 phases is the time to start resting, start slowing the heck down, as you've already mentioned, in terms of your fitness and what you're eating, starting to slow down and actually giving yourself some more downtime, less things on the calendar, maybe weekends with no plans, right? Nothing booked in. Yeah, I love those weekends. Just allow it. That's kind of our nesting phase, if we did get pregnant during that time, right? We're actually starting to nest, and energetically, that's our rest time. And even heading into those first few days of the bleed. And that was the piece that I never did, that left me in the cycle of burnout, was not resting during that phase. And of course, my sugar cravings were worse. I was sleeping worse. I was moodier, right? I think PMS symptoms were 10 times worse because I wasn't honoring what my body needed. So if you can, this was social events, trips, things like that, planning sort of around that has made a big difference. And I think is such a radical piece of reclaiming our power as women and learning to work with our bodies instead of against them. So thank you for sharing everything, Jenn. This has been so incredible. I want to keep talking to you forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. So where can everybody come and connect more with you? Find out more about what you're doing. I mean, obviously you are such a wealth of knowledge in so many different areas that we didn't get to talk about today, but would love to encourage people to come and connect with you.
Well, thank you for having me today. I've really loved our chat. The best place online is Instagram. That's where I hang out, and it's just my name, Jenn Pike. I do run an online studio called Synced, which is based on the 4 phases of our cycle. And so this is a movement studio. So it is exercise based on either where you are at menstrually in your body or lunar wise. And so we have calendars where you can go in and it's okay, I'm in my follicular phase. Click this tab. These are all the classes for your follicular phase, or this is all the classes for the waxing moon. And so we have a 24/7 on-demand library. We have about 1,000 videos in the library right now in all the different phases. Plus we do live classes. We give you seasonal meal plans and recipes, and we do fireside chats together. So that's Synced. And you can just head to my website, jennpike.com /synced for that. And then the Hormone Project. This is where, this is the journey that I take women on. And so I am mentoring women over the course of 3 months, teaching them what we should have known about our bodies as women, forever. And really empowering you and giving you the vocabulary so that you know how to go into your appointments with your practitioners. You know what to ask for. You know how to understand blood work and labs and when symptoms arise, and you can really advocate for yourself. And then I run business mentorship as well. So there's quite a few different things, but if you go to the website, and we have lots of freebies and master classes, you can just go hang there.
Awesome. I'll, of course, make sure all those links are below in the show notes, and you can come and check all of that good stuff out. That's amazing, Jenn. You're up to, you're doing some amazing work in the world. I'm so grateful for you and for you taking the time to come on the show today. This has been so great. I love learning from you, and I love this conversation. I want to have more conversations like this. I think.
Well, you and I are together
so
next
important.
week. You're coming on my.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. Yes, I know. I'll see you next week, and I'm so excited to come on your show. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode. I hope that you got a lot out of this, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.